Meantime, President Trump's new national security advisor has just raised the prospect of a walkout in the middle of those high-stake talks with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This shedding some light on why the president said something similar.
If I think that it's a meeting that is not going to be fruitful, we're not going to go. If the meeting when I'm there is not fruitful, I will respectfully leave the meeting.
Ari Aramesh is our national security and foreign policy analyst. He worked as Middle East and Iran analyst at the Century Foundation, a prominent think tank in New York City and Washington, D.C. So, Ari, welcome. Nice to have you on.
Good to be with you.
All right. So why say this out loud, this notion of if it's not fruitful, I'm going to get up and walk out? Do you think this is some sort of, pre-planned to show who has the upper hand in such a high-pressure meeting?
Well, it's going back to who's got the bigger button, right? So, unfortunately, this is not exactly a meeting between George Herbert Walker Bush and Helmut Kohl. This is a meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. So a lot comes down to personality, a lot comes down to showmanship, and a lot of it comes down to fanfare. A lot of the substance, a lot of the actual important work is going to be done behind the scenes by sort of at the deputy level and also at principal level. You saw Mike Pompeo going to North Korea, sort of acting as a would-be Secretary of State. But on the other hand, the president is also getting advice from more hawkish elements within the White House, like John Bolton. And they're telling him, hey, Mr. President, if you come out too nice and too soft, Kim Jong-un might think your nuclear button is smaller than his. So you've got to play good cop, bad cop at the same time. So that's what he's doing. But again, we got to be careful about what we're getting into. We are setting, I think, our expectations way too high. Having said that, with all the criticism that goes towards President Trump and his foreign policy, being able to sit down with the North Koreans and getting something successful and substantive out of this would be a huge achievement.
Sure. And I think back to your point on John Bolton, I think, according to reports, he is the one who had floated this notion, right, of walking out of this meeting. But we don't know a lot about Kim. We think we know he could be quite unpredictable. How would he react to this move of if the president were to up and walk out and disrespect him?
We don't know. And that's the thing. Unpredictability in foreign policy is venomous. It's one of those things where you don't want to have. Now, that's why you have all these sort of on-the-ground meetings for months and months, for actually a couple of years. For instance, in the Iran nuclear deal, the U.S. delegation and the Iranians met in the country of Oman in the Persian Gulf and sort of set the groundwork, laid out the groundwork. And it was very secretive. But when the principals, Kerry from the U.S. and Zarif from Iran, met with other delegates from the P5+1, Germany, Russia, China, Britain and France, and so on and so forth, most of the substantive work had already been done. There were very few surprises. This is not the case here because you can brief President Trump if you can actually get to brief him, or Kim Jong-un for that matter, which we don't know much about him. But again, they're so unpredictable. You don't know exactly when push comes to shove how they're going to react. Secondly, this sort of rhetoric, even though seemed to have been unproductive, that president said he's going to destroy North Korea or Kim Jong-un is going to face fire and fury. On the other hand,
that was some months ago. It seems like some of this conversation has changed, right? Trying for this diplomacy, getting seats at the table. We know everything's being negotiated. And again, the president in the last couple of days even saying maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't happen. But we're going to continue the conversations because this is obviously a huge, huge meeting to potentially take place. Ari Aramesh, thank you so very much for weighing in on that.